We should be live. Well, there we go. Welcome to the Tavern Chat podcast. It's a live stream. I see that Pex is our first live stream viewer showing up in the comments. There you go. Hi, Pex.
He's such a trooper.
Yes. So, as if you couldn't have guessed, if you haven't seen the title to this, I have Alyssa Fayden, probably one of the most sought after cartographers in the RPG field at this moment, and probably a world-renowned war gamer, but we won't go into that yet. We'll touch on it later. But Alyssa, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm having a ball. We haven't even started, and I'm grinning ear to ear. I'm just so jazzed right now.
Well, like you said, in a few minutes we were hanging out before we started this live stream. Normally at conventions, we get a chance to sit down, we talk, we catch up. And due to the world of COVID, which nothing else you can call it, but the pandemic has closed down in-person conventions, and we just haven't had that chance to catch up. And I miss it, to be honest.
I miss it too, and I didn't think that I would, but I genuinely miss it. And I think my brain. I touched on this like earlier on in a PM to you, but I think my brain must be like just ready to like start hanging out with friends again, because I dreamt of you last night. We were doing this podcast in person. Jack and I came to your house. You and your darling wife met us there at the door, and you had a little mini convention going behind your scenes, and it's like, so my brain must be, I want to get back in person with these people so bad.
Hell yeah. And you know what, and it's funny too, because I had thought prior to the world of COVID, Joe the lawyer, who many of you know, we're going to be starting a podcast live stream every other Friday starting this coming Friday, Christmas evening. But Joe and I were talking about doing a pub con, because Tenkar's Tavern. And we were going to use my local pub, and it was always things in flux. When, of course, now, due to the world of COVID, my local pub, which is New York City, shut down all the bars and restaurants right now. But even if they hadn't, they got rid of their party room that was attached to them because they had to cut back on expenses. So if whenever a pub con does take place, I'll have to find a new place to do it.
All right. But so in the post-COVID world, though, that sounds like a really good idea. I think that would be actually pretty brilliant. I'd love to see a podcast and stuff going on in the background like that.
Oh yeah, I've done live streams. I think the last North Texas I went to, I didn't go to the one in 2020, even though they held it in person. But in 2019. We had a session of tasting really bad liquor that Chris Stogel was nice enough.
Oh no!
Oh my God! Had Bad Mike, Ben Barsh, and a number of others from the con. We were sitting at the table, and folks would come along, and we grab them, and we're like, "Oh, Ben Burns, take a seat, have this, try it." And these were the little nips bottles, and we were actually pouring the liquor into the caps, which was more than enough, by the way, to make you feel
a little bit buzzed.
Oh, not buzzed, just really get a feel for how bad some of that liquor was.
Okay.
There was 4 Locos, which was kind of like Fruit Loops. And when I say kind of, it's like if Fruit Loops and Chernobyl met in a vat of horrible vodka, that would probably be better than what we were tasting. But it made for a great time. It really did.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So now, what have you been up to in this last year? Because I know you've actually taken the reins of the world that's kind of slowed down in COVID time. But you've been doing a lot of stuff on your end, so I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, so I kind of decided almost to do the opposite of slowing down. I went up to 11, I think, on almost everything. I mean, of course, we've got the cartography commissions there still, and I don't do it because of the commission. I do it because I just love drawing maps, and I think we're probably doing 4 or 5 simultaneously at the same time. We got the Frog Gods and Necropolis map that we're working on. which I think that they're going to actually kickstart early next year. We've got the Castle Keeper's Guide for Troll Lord Games. We've had the city map of Lukatoy for Zagora Games. And these have all been like happening at the same time, you know, overlapping each other. We're actually going to work on a Viking medieval map for Gallant Knights games. That's going to be another one that we're going to start working on right now. So I've actually started to really ramp up my personal commissions because I Twitch stream them. And I know that sounds weird because while I like working off camera and more productive off camera, hanging out with friends, and I always say it's a little bit like me just chilling like a convention, and I'm drawing a map and friends hang out with me and we chat as I draw. And sometimes I'm talking about what I'm doing. Sometimes I'm talking about my techniques. A lot of the time it's just I'm drawing something for, you know, Troll Lord Games, and friends, people in the chat will start firing back. You should do this. You should do that. You should draw a Brock Tower. And I'm like, what's a Brock Tower? Off to do research. Next minute, we're drawing a Brock Tower. And that is honestly, I know that this year has been a pretty bad year. But from a Twitch perspective, from a virtual hanging out with friends perspective, I've really just ramped up my interaction with them through mapping. Right. So that's been a big thing for me. On the flip side, though, I've also, I realized and accepted that I only have so much time in the day. And there's only so much I can do. And I've started to lean heavily on a guy that we all know as Pex. And Pex has sort of taken over a vast amount of my social media and my Patreon. So we completely rebooted my Patreon. And so now I'm even more active trying to get like goodies out to my Patreons all of the time. Brush sets, map pieces, you know, tutorials, videos, voiceovers, you know, you name it. And that honestly has been an absolute blast. That's been so much fun.
Well, you see, now for me too, I've used 2020 on some level as a reboot. I actually got out the premiere issue of Torchlight. The full-size first issue is being held up all because of me, but that's neither here nor there. And Bad Mike and I have taken our off and on again live stream, which we sometimes did on Wednesdays and sometimes didn't. It's now every Wednesday because we have found that not only do we enjoy, again, socializing with each other, which is something that we've been missing because of this lack of physical conventions, so the lack of meeting in meet space, for lack of a better term, but we notice that there's a lot of interaction from the listeners that get to come in. So like you're wearing a TotalCon shirt and, you know, we've talked with Angelia over at TotalCon, and for TotalCon, the Wednesday night before, the Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night of Mike and I are going to be doing live streams. And we're going to hope to have a special guest each night because I go to conventions for much the same reason you go to conventions, Alyssa, and that is to meet people. I socialize. I will run a game or two. I will work the table for the frogs because I get to socialize. And I hang out in a bar, not just because I like alcohol, but because I like meeting people and talking to people from the hobby, people that follow the OSR or beyond that in gaming, people that I only see at conventions. Maybe they aren't big on social media, so I don't get the chance to talk to them otherwise. That's why I like conventions. So TotalCon this year is going to be virtual. So we talked about it, and we were like, why don't we do basically a TotalCon hangout and grab...
I think it's a great idea. I think it's a stunning idea.
Yeah, we grab, you know, we got a few people that we're not going to name just yet that they're on the list, but they haven't confirmed. Excuse me. But we'd like to get people who can tell stories of the old days of TSR or whatever. Stories that you would probably hear at the bar in a gaming convention or over here. Or over here. It might not be directed at you, but you might overhear it. We'd like to get some of that stuff going because I think that is what recharges my batteries when I go to a convention. And that to me is huge. Vubon666. I go to conventions for the wonderful odors. I only had that issue at my one Gen Con back in '94 because people were sleeping in hotel hallways. But I mean, I haven't had that problem at the conventions. Yes, I probably did misspell Alyssa's name in the title. I'm sure I did. I can't see it right here where in the room I'm in, but I spelled somebody whose name was Tim with an E at the end. So Time Connolly was.
I appreciate John pointing it out. I can't see it either, but honestly, as a small segue, my entire life, I have had Alyssa misspelled a million times. I've had Fayden misspelled and mispronounced a million times. I'm kind of
get used to it.
It's fine.
And not for nothing. I mean, yes, my name is Tenkar. That's how people know me on social media. But my real last name is pronounced Stine, but it looks like Stein. I've been called Stein my whole life, or Steiny, or Steeny, or Stainy, and I just whatever. I no longer. I used to get offended when I was in elementary school, and then you got to the point where it's not their fault that it's not the quote regular spelling that they're expecting to see. People, I guess my mind was sees Tim assumes it's going to have to be an E at the end because I'm always typing out time for one reason or another. And of course I spell Eric with a K, and who the hell does that? All right, everybody spells it with a C, unless you're like a Scandinavian, which I'm not. But you know, we got to cause trouble. It's got to make things interesting for people.
Mix things up, keep them interesting. You know, in the whole convention thing too, you were talking about overhearing conversations and such, or in the case of some people watching, over smelling odors. But whatever you go to conventions for, that I'm not going to judge. There's nothing wrong with that. But you know, one thing I love is after you've played a couple of games or run some games, or you've been watching a booth, and you're probably a little bit tired, and you head towards like the bar area. And this is one reason why, by the way, that I like TotalCon. And I like Gary Con a lot because they have wonderful bar areas. And it's not about the drinking. It's like when you come into these locations and you see all of these clusters of friends hanging out, and you start to see like it could be like some guests, it could be some RPG sort of, you know, celebrities. You see these hanging out and these little buzzes of social interactions going on. I love that.
Oh God, yeah, and it isn't cliquish, you know. They're very accepting of complete strangers, pretty much just eardropping and going.
Yeah.
Oh,
and they're all waving to each other. People are going by and they're like, you know, they're talking. Oh yeah, it's not a click. It's just these little islands of conversations you could drift between, and that's wonderful. Yeah. Even if some of them are handing out nasty drinks, it's still good.
Oh, but yeah, the nasty drinks is what you go there for. Come on. You have a question. How many completed or partially completed maps are lying in a graveyard folder somewhere on your computer?
You know, that's actually a really good question. And because my initial response would be, not that many, but I'd be lying. Because what I used to do back in England, I'm going back decades now, when this first started and I wasn't a professional, is I would start city maps. And it could be just a pencil outline. It could, maybe I'd ink it in, maybe I'd draw the river, and I would stop for some reason. I would stop and I'd move on. And I think what I was trying to do was like an assembly line, and I was trying to actually get like multiple like maps going at the same stage, and then so I could do all of the buildings at the same time. You know, well, I ended up with dozens, and I didn't realize it until I actually came over here to the United States. I had my belongings shipped over here. And I opened up one day, and I'm talking about a full 10 years after being in the United States, I opened up this folder, and there were all of these partially drawn maps. And so there's at least that side of things. And then I always take on like little personal projects that aren't commissions, but the commissions have to win. And so I've got personal projects where, let's say I've got an old map that I don't particularly like and I want to redraw it. Well, my new drawing style is extremely detailed and it takes a long time to do. And so I've at least got, 6 layers of one city that are partially or not drawn, but need to be drawn. So I've got dozens. And most of them are in the personal project category. Occasionally, I'll get a commission that would say, put it on hold. We want to do something else instead. But it's usually personal projects, dozens of them.
Oh, yet another question. How many hand-drawn maps of yours have not yet been scanned?
That's a really good question too. So the truthful answer is not many. And I say that because when I got all of my original maps from England, I scanned every one that was worth it. And that was generally all of my finished city maps and some of the partials. I scanned them all right out of the gate because I didn't want to lose them. And I wanted a digital copy. So I actually made great effort to ensure I had a high-res scan of everything. There are a couple of exceptions. I did a huge, and I'm talking huge city map on the back of some wallpaper of all things.
Oh,
when I was actually still at college. My dad was always like wallpapering and like decorating and stuff like that. And he had this roll of wallpaper. And I did a massive city map on that. That is still in England. And so that's not scanned. And then I've got, honestly, I even scanned some of my bad maps, which I'm actually, every month I like to share something with Patreon or my patrons on Patreon, like that I don't really want to share publicly. And so I've got a little hopper of those where I look at them and I go, or it was just a weird style I was pursuing. So I've scanned, I want to say, almost everything. And then the originals I've actually sent to Bill Meinhardt for his little museum.
Oh, that's cool. But yeah, Bill's, he's got the original city-state map, I think, too.
Right. So my maps don't compare to that at all. But, you know, it's like if I want to keep my original maps from 30 years ago, like in some kind of safety and prosperity, I was like, it's got to be Bill, right? So here you go, Bill. I shipped them all to him. One day we're vowed I'm going to sit down. I'm going to give him the history of each one.
Wow. Now, here's a question that hasn't been asked, but I'm going to ask it. How did you get into mapping in the first place? What drove you to it?
Actually, the answer is fairly straightforward, and it's honest, and it's genuine, and I think it probably speaks to all of us to a degree. So there I am in 84, and I'm aging myself, I acknowledge it. 83, 84, something like that, and I've got my hands on the box set of Dungeons and Dragons, and I don't have any scenarios. I don't have anything, right? I'm running it because no one else at school actually knows what it is, but people want to play. And so I have to write my own scenarios. I have to start writing my own adventures. Now, don't get me wrong, keep on the Borderlands and that type of thing. You know, we would grab them, we would run them, you know, the caves of Shokant, however it's pronounced.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
We ran through those. We did play them. But I started to really lean on developing my own games and ergo my own world. Heavily inspired by things like Conan the Barbarian and that type of thing, or Krull, or Dragon Master, or whatever. You know, there was that type of thing. It was a golden era, and I was writing my own stuff. And if I'm doing my own world, my own cities, my own places, my own locales, I gotta have maps. And so I started drawing my own maps, and I started to go to the local library because there was no internet.
Right.
And I would grab books and get inspiration from them, and I would, you know, and whether it was from like current published works I was getting, like I always remember there was an era that I was heavily inspired by the game Shogun. Shogun had a fold-out map that was a hex map. And I was like, oh, this is an interesting style. And so I started drawing maps that style. But no one was doing cities. So I had to draw my own cities. And I just developed a style for it. And so I ended up just drawing dozens and dozens and dozens of cities for me, for my personal game. Skip forward 20 years, Eric. And we're now in the Facebook era. Like it was 2000, something like that, late 2000s. And I stopped role playing for a while. I started getting back into it. So I started joining some Facebook groups. Old school not old school war gamers, old school role players, I think was the name of the group that I joined, hanging out with people, talking about Dungeons and Dragons. I'm having a vibe. These are my peeps, right? And one day someone shared one of their maps. And I was like, oh, that's a thing. You can share maps. Oh, maybe I should share one of mine. And I genuinely just, you know, thought, yeah, I'm a little embarrassed, but it's one of mine. And I shared one of my city maps. And the reaction that I got was people falling out of their seats. They were just like, oh, what are we looking at here? This is incredible. Do you have any more? And I just was like, well, yeah, actually, boom, 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 boom. And, you know, in amongst all of that, someone was like, draw one for me, draw one for me. And then that quickly becomes someone contacting you that happens to be running, you know, a company saying,
Right.
do me one. And that's where it started. I drew them for myself, and I just shared them one day, and suddenly I'm drawing them for other people. It was never planned.
Well, I am sure the ones that you consider to be rejects are far beyond the abilities of mere mortal man. Something that many of us could put out won't even compare to what you consider to be your worst.
I really, really, really appreciate that. And I know there was someone actually that gave me a compliment on the Gaxmore map, and I would like to acknowledge that. By also talking about what you just sort of said. And it's like, it's strange because one day there was a real life friend of mine who's an artist, and he wanted me, and actually it was kind of goes into Princess Striggers here, what advice would you give? But I was trying to teach him how to draw city maps because he's a traditional artist, okay, and he's really good at it. And I'm trying to teach him to draw maps. And so I'm like, do this and draw the walls and think about the shape of the city, think about the topography. And I'm explaining all of this, and he's following along. And have you ever seen the meme where it's like how to draw an owl? And it's like you draw the outline, you draw the circle for the eyes, then you finish all the rest. And it's like a fully finished out. You go, whoa. What happened between 3 and 4? Well, I then went into, and now you start drawing the buildings. And it was at that point he went, whoa. I think this is harder than you think it is. And I think that's the magical step right there. There's something that either my brain just functions that way, or just over the years and years and years of drawing, I do it without really thinking about it. And I've started to try and explain in videos, and I'm going to be doing a lot more of this too on my YouTube channel in 2021, is giving little guides about how I now draw these city blocks. For Gaxmore, it was easy, and I really appreciate the compliment, by the way, because Gaxmore was an incredibly fun map to work on, and is going to be always one of my favorites because of that. And I could talk for 15 minutes just about Gaxmore and the process behind drawing Gaxmore, because we're talking about an original that has actually gone through a further iteration by other cartographers. And now this was going to be the 2020 version of it. So I've got to kick it up a notch into the Alyssa Fayden sort of stratosphere. But I've got to stay true to the canon, right? I've got to, I have to have the same buildings in the same locations and the same city shape and so on and so forth. So maybe that one we can talk about another time. But that was a slightly different process because it was canon.
See, that blows my mind. Because you're right. You are working off of, like, I guess when you're working off of somebody else's material, you have to stay true to it, but you have to bring your style to it. And you have a very detailed style. I'm amazed at the work that you've done. And I've spoken with Bill Webb, and Bill Webb gushes over the work that you've done. And again, I'm a mere mortal. I know my limits. I'm certainly, my parents are both, they paint still life and oil color and some watercolor, but I don't have that ability. You got to know something. Sometimes you have to know your limits. I'm good at talking. So.
Well, and so the thing is for me, and Peter's asked a great question. We'll get to that right now. But the thing for me is I realized when I was literally 11 or 12, and I think everyone around me realized, that I actually just loved almost doing repetitious drawing. I won an art competition in my city by drawing a Roman amphitheater complete with all of the spectators, thousands and thousands and thousands of like little stick figures, thousands of them. And it's like, no one else, especially an 11-year-old girl, no one's doing that. No. Everyone else is drawing buildings and apples or whatever. And I do the Colosseum. Well, because we had one in Chester, where I come from, a Roman ruin of one. So that was my inspiration. And so I draw this thing. And I think that was the very first time, that was the point in time where it's like, oh, so if she's going to draw, she doesn't draw particularly well. I can't draw a hand or a face or an apple. Right. But thousands and thousands of squiggly shapes and making them into building blocks and little gardens and trees and ponds. This I can do. And it's a time thing. And Eric, I mean this when I say I realized that my brand is not one of just churning out stuff. I don't brand myself by saying this is a 4-hour map, or I created 6 maps today. You know, I don't brand myself and just churning out dungeon maps. Anyone can do dungeon maps. You know, some people do them very well. I'm not going to knock it. But my shtick is, if I'm going to do a dungeon map, I'm going to lay stories and little Easter eggs in there and ridiculous amounts of detail still. I want you to look at it and see things 6 months later that you never saw to begin with. Those are the only types of maps I like doing. And things like overland maps and city maps just let me off the hook. And Gaxmore has that in spades. If I'm going to draw Gaxmore, my style, I'm going to have a little dead chariot rider in the amphitheater. I'm going to have dead bodies piled up on the steps because the description says there were. I'm going to read the descriptions and I'm going to draw it on the map. I don't care what size it prints at. I'm putting the detail in there because that's what I do. So that's my brand now.
So would that be the particular map that you're going to hold in high regard? I mean,
that's a difficult question to answer, and for different reasons. And I don't think I can do one. I think there are a few. So indulge me if I give you like my top 3. And I tend to hold them equal for different reasons, and that's why it's hard to push one away from the others. One is actually, honestly, Gaxmore. And it's not my most complex map, but it is one of my most detailed maps. Just the personality that is within it. And after 2 iterations of other cartographers, I'd like to feel that you could look at the Gaxmore map and say, that's Gaxmore, and yet it's completely unlike any other Gaxmore that you've ever seen. And I feel like that I put a good mark on that one. I feel proud of it. Teagle, I would have to do for Fog God Games, only because it was a 12-foot map. And I mean, that's ridiculous.
I ran it at North Texas with a laser pointer, and I have sciatica, so my ability to bend down and move miniatures was like 0. But thankfully, I had very great players that were willing to move the minis on that map. And I did not run it at all using beyond just the basic of what it was. Teagle is a fun house, but I used your art to inspire me as to what was waiting in each room. That's how I ran it, because to me that spoke. And Teagle's a classic adventure, don't get me wrong, but as written, it was initially the version was a dry version, and that was a copy I had with me. I didn't have the Frog God version, but your art, your detailing, I was just like, I know exactly what this room is. I know exactly what's going on here. I know exactly how to engage my party and give them the time that they want. And that really was remarkable. And again, to see a 12-foot map laid out on the floor is amazing. I don't think I would own it myself, except that Rach would probably not let me hang up a 12-foot map on my wall. I don't think my ceiling is high enough anyway. But
well, and so the size of Teagle definitely is unique, right? And so I do like to pin a little bit of pride on that. But it's I think any map, and here's the deal, any map where I can say I've done something other cartographers are not doing, is one I'm going to be proud of, and not in an elitism kind of way. There's a lot of great cartographers out there that have their brand, their style, and they do it exceptionally well. Well, mine is I if I'm going to do something like Teagle, then every room is going to be its own little adventure. And the fact that, like, so anyone can knock out a kitchen and like at a battle map scale and do so like very, very quickly. 15 minutes later, kitchen, moving on. Well, not me. Not me. I'm going to draw that kitchen for 4 hours. And I'm going to have flour on the floor with footsteps in it. I'm going to have old pies on the table with knives and forks scattered around. I'm going to have a personality. I'm going to have like washing like plates, etc. in the sink, half washing with the water. And I want you to look at every room and go, oh, look at this. oh, look at this. Like even bedrooms that had no description. I would have a bed in there and there'd be a blooded knife on the table next to it. And it's like, for you running the game, you go, I could put a little story behind this.
There you go.
And that's what I do. So that's my number 2 pick. Lastly, and I know that John's got a question here, but lastly, my third one would honestly be the ones that I did for Fallen Empires, I believe, James Carpio, back in around 2012, 2013. And they're the maps that look like scarab beetles with their wings spread out, and they're city maps. You might have seen them.
That was the DCC RPG setting that he kickstarted.
Right.
Okay.
And I originally provided them to in black and white. He only wanted black and white. Years later, I colored them. And they're visually one of the most out-of-the-box, striking city maps. Like, people look at them and go, oh, wow, you know? And so I'm proud of those. And they were originally ink on paper, too. I'm proud of those only because they were so unique. Like, no one's drawn cities like that before, and they make people's heads turn every time they walk past a booth. If they're hanging up, they go, ah, you know, and I love that.
All right, so John, I really struggle with making maps, especially cities. What do you use as visual references? I would like to make cities inspired by history.
Actually, so that's really good, and you can do cities inspired by history. I've done Luxembourg Castle. It's a star fortress. I've done Dubrovnik, which was one of the filming locations for Game of Thrones. And do you know how I did those? Google Maps.
Really?
Google Maps. I zoomed them in on my screen so it felt good. Screen capture. I opened up my particular choice of drawing material, which is Photoshop. Resized them in Photoshop until I got a good composition. Now, of course, the thing about these is they're going to, like, you know, modern cities are going to spill beyond walls. They're going to feel very modern. But I was able to trace wall shapes. I did the same with ancient Athens too, by the way. I got the shape of the wall correct. I got the main gates positioned right. With Dubrovnik, I was even drawing little boulders where they are today in the water. It gives you a very unique harbor shape with Dubrovnik. I got all of that right. The wall shape is very unique. I traced all of that. Then you could throw away what I like to call the trace layer. You've got your main streets and main sort of locations, like maybe an old church, and you go, yeah, that would have been there in fantasy times. And then you could just fill in the blanks. And for inspiration of filling in blanks, honestly, I don't look at anyone else because my style is so unique. For me, it has been one of, I like a negative space for my roads, so I don't draw roads unless there's no buildings around them. The buildings will define your roads for you. You're drawing abstract shapes for city blocks, collection of roofs versus individual buildings. If you get too mired down into individual buildings, you're going to have lots and lots and lots of rectangles on the map. It's going to look like crap. So like I start to fill neighborhoods with these random shapes and suggestions of alleyways and things like that. And I work neighborhood by neighborhood. And honestly, that's all that I do.
That's pretty damn good. Now, Night Heron, is there a particular map or setting that you would like to draw that you haven't had the chance to yet?
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to happen. So the Overlord, City of the Overlord. Have I got the right name there?
Judges Guild?
Yeah. I think I'd like to do that one. Honestly, I'd like to redo, is it Bard's Gate by Frog God? They had that flagship city a couple of years ago. I'd love to do my take on that, but I know that probably wouldn't happen. But you know the big one? You know the real big one? What's the one with the spaceship? I'm forgetting it now in my head. The old one with the egg on the map. I own it. I own the bloody scenario. People are going to remember. Help me out in chat. What's the one with the spaceship? And everyone's it's a fantasy map, but you go on board and actually it's
Blackmore.
No, not Blackmore.
No? All right, then I don't know either.
Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. Come on, people.
Come on.
Well, you call yourself nerds, hand in your badges.
Yeah, but you were saying city.
But maps that I would like to draw, I would love to do Expedition to the Barrier Peaks.
That would be awesome. That
my style.
That was a fun, wacky adventure to run back in the day. when I really didn't own too many adventures because it was expensive when you were a teen. $450 was not cheap, and these were usually written for tournaments. So then you get them and get it home and go, oh shit, that's gonna fuck my party up if I use it as written. But you had to play it as written because that's what you did back then.
And if they come out, they'd load it down with laser rifles and stuff.
Yes, it's like, oh no, I'm gonna really screw up the game.
Yeah, it was a unique one for sure. But I would love to do that. That one and the Overlord one, and like honestly, just the big names, the big titles. I would love to do those. Only to put my spin on it, you know, because I think my spin is unique.
Tail of the Comet. That is Jeff Talanian's, right? For Axe. Somebody's like saying Princess Strega. I feel like Tail of the Comet is a spiritual sequel to Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. Now I'm going to make a true confession. I own a shit ton, probably a metric shit ton, since I'm talking to somebody who's a native Brit, and of modern OSR releases, and I've probably scratched the surface of about 10% of it. I buy way more often than my personal schedule allows me to read, but I have to because
it's about owning them. It's about looking at them on the shelf.
Yes.
And you smile inside.
Draw the map and get somebody to write Expedition to the Border Tetons. Well, that's always an option, I guess. But if you draw it, they will come.
Oh. I actually have been tempted to do that type of thing. If there was a project, honestly, that I would love to get involved in, it would be something like that. That I draw a map, and there's maybe a few writers, like, you know, good writers that get the work done, and I go, here, let's do something with that. I would love to do something like that.
Well, I would think, and I'm just spitballing here, but I think that if you drew a map with the idea that others would draw the inspiration from your map to create the adventure, I think that would fly really well. And I think that you know enough creative people in the industry.
It'd be a fun project. I'd love to do something like that.
Peck said he dropped good money for the Keep on the Borderlands by Alyssa. Well, it could be Keep on the Lands of the Border. Come on, we got to, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Joe wants to know, did you say what mapping program you use? I think
I did not. I think I hinted at it. So I used to draw ink on paper up to about 10 years ago, and then I actually got a Cintiq 24-inch HD Touch. It's basically a touch monitor, and they exist in spades nowadays. The Wacom, or Wacom, I think it's meant to be pronounced as, but I hate saying that. The Wacom brand is actually pretty darn expensive, and it's expensive because they're touch capable. You don't need it. You just need one that you could draw on. Huion, Huion, have very affordable lines, larger than 24-inch, for less than $1,000. They just don't have touch. Don't need it. So you can now take a pen, and where's my pen? She says after, here it is. You can take just a regular, stylus and draw on the screen directly. So it has a very natural feel. But digitally, blows the socks off ink on paper, and I've done both, because you can do take backs, you can do erasing, you can move things around if things go wrong. So digital will free you up, and then you just need a digital software to draw in. I happen to draw in Photoshop, but GIMP, Procreate, any of these will work just as well. This is the decade. This is the time where drawing digitally is affordable, and you've got the tools that actually can come completely free. So this is a great time to get into it.
Wow.
It's just hand drawing.
Well, and that's what's changed a lot of things. Recent technology, and I think just even this year of the pandemic is going to push a lot of things fast forward. Even art, because it's easier to share art that's digitalized than it is in physical format. people aren't probably going to art shows and such. Tabletop role playing, everybody wants digital material for maps for their VTT. It's going to be an interesting to see where we are a year from now after all this. We'll see what kind of technologies have caught up.
I completely agree. Honestly, I feel a little bit behind the curve. And Joe definitely could talk about Campaign Cartographer. But I feel that they're almost a little bit behind the curve in a way with the Cintiq 24-inch HD Touch, only because nowadays there are cheaper, better, arguably, options. Wacom is a great brand. They do great stuff, but they're also extremely bloody expensive. And then I see people just like splashing out $800. Beautiful time to be alive in that respect.
I still remember experimenting with bulletin boards with a dial-up modem 300 baud on my Commodore 64. So you talked about dating yourself before. I'm going to really solidly date myself on that shit. Oh my God. But yeah.
Well, okay, so funny enough, dating ourselves, right? So Joe just brought up Campaign Cartographer and everything. So I actually genuinely, I went from ink on paper, and it was a very natural progression in the early era of computers when Pro Fantasy released their first Campaign Cartographer 1 in the little white binder with the little discs inside. I still own that. That it was very natural to go in that direction. And Pro Fantasy have great tools. I've met the Pro Fantasy guys. I've sat down and broken bread with the Pro Fantasy guys. I have nothing but positive things to say about them. I had a collection of probably about 20 Pro Fantasy discs. They come in these little sort of disc holders.
Right.
Up until about 7 years ago, I used Pro Fantasy a lot. They are great tools, and yes, something that is definitely viable for creating maps. The reason why I got rid of them is I am freer to do what I want and make it look unique hand drawing, and I'm not going to get that using something like Pro Fantasy. You can get great results, brilliant results that are adequate for publishing and perfect for home use very quickly. Bit of a learning curve, but it's a good tool that I used for at least 20 years, and then until I didn't want to use it anymore. But they're solid. I have a brush pack on Pro Fantasy, so that's how much I believe in it.
Oh, nice. So now, what are you doing now? Like, what are your current projects? What are you delving into?
All right, so I've got a few things going on, and I don't know how I got into this situation, Eric, but apparently I always have a few things overlapping. I just literally wrapped up on a city map for Zagora Games, which looks beautiful. It's based on the Mediterranean, so unique coloring. I am working on Frog God Games' Necropolis. That's going to be the big drive here. There'll be a lot of that coming out of me. I'm still working on the Castle Keeper's Guide for Troll Lord Games. That's 12 maps, and I'm drawing all on one canvas right now. I'm going into coloring actually on that one tonight on stream. So at least, and then we've got, let me get this right. Sea Kings of the Whale Roads or something like that. It's called for Gallant Knight Games, and it's a Viking map. So we've got 4 maps going all at the same time that I'm kind of kicking down the road. And then next year, I've got a client that actually wants me to draw maybe the largest city map I've ever drawn ever. So that will be dominating the middle of the year.
You got your hands full. And on top of that, you've got a Christmas promotion that you've been doing. Now this I want to hear about, because I do OSR Christmas every year, but I want to hear what you got going.
Okay, so this is the 12 Days of Alyssamass, and it's partly a way of giving back to my patrons and Twitch subscribers, and it's partly a way of giving back into the world in general. So we're doing 2 main things. One is each day that I stream and actually some other times as well on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, we're doing a daily giveaway. So last week, for example, we did 5 giveaways. Now it can be one of my canvas prints on Noble Dwarf. It could be a cup with one of my maps on it, a t-shirt, a hoodie. You get to pick, each day is a different theme. Last Friday, signed copies of some of my, lean the other way, that way. Anyway, collection behind me. Signed copies of some of my Call of Cthulhu books. I've got a Call of Cthulhu book that I did for Golden Goblin Press called Island of Ignorance. I've got a signed copy of that I'm going to give away. So each day for the 12 days of Alyssamass, we're doing a giveaway, and Twitch or one of my other channels. So watch out for that. We're in the 2nd week. Also, as part of this, for the entire month of December, I'm going to give a quarter of everything I earn on Twitch, on Patreon, and on my merchandising sales to Toys for Tots. And I've got some industry leading personalities, such as Stefan Picorni, who are going to match me dollar for dollar. So we've currently got a Toys for Tots page up on the official site. And some people have given a little bit ahead of time, but just after Christmas, I'm going to tell everyone what I've actually managed to raise this month. And we've got something like half a dozen people or so right now that are going to match me dollar for dollar. And we're going to donate it all for Toys for Tots.
Well, and I'll tell you this much. When you do a match, it really does encourage people. I've done that. Right now, I'm doing a match with for Stray Cats. Oh God, I hate to say this, man. I am having a blank as to the creator of the DCC Weird West RPG that's coming out. I can picture his goddamn face, and I can't picture your name right now. Senility at 53. There, I threw my age out there to be real. But the Tavern is matching the first 250 that members of the Tavern raise. Well, actually, we're matching the first 500. I guarantee that we'll match at least 250, even if we don't hit 250. Because here's the thing: if money is tight for Joe Schmo or some random person, but they can come up with $5, I feel that it is only right, especially if you're part of my community, where we make your $5 go even further. And to have all these other people coming along and saying, whatever your people raise will also help match. That's awesome. That's what community is all about. I've mentioned this on other podcasts that I've done, but there's a small segment. I guess I can't say of the community. There's a small segment in the hobby that claim that the OSR is not a community. All due respect, those people can go fuck themselves, because it obviously is a community. You can see it when you gather in groups at conventions, when you gather virtually, when you gather in your Facebook groups, when people watch your streams. It is a community.
Absolute communities. They absolutely are. 100%. And I'll be honest. I mean, and I don't like doing this, but I wrote to, let's say, a dozen folks saying, hey, if I do this, would you match me or at least donate something? Everyone was like, yeah, of course, no problem. Luke Gygax was like, yeah, sure, no problem. Gary Conn will match you dollar for dollar. And it's like, that's heartwarming. That's brilliant. It's inspiring. So no matter what happens this year, no matter how much I raise, I'm doing it again next year. It's brilliant.
Awesome. Well, listen, I'm going to tell you right now, next year, reach out to me. Okay. The Tavern will put some dollars behind that too.
I'll do that, my friend. Thank you.
So, wow. Now, I'm going to go totally off the rails because, as we stated in the beginning, we have not hung out in over a year. We have not spent time doing our usual stuff. In your case, like dressing up in authentic armor, I still have a great visual of that going, how the hell did she travel with that suit? And that's what I want to ask you that question. It was obviously it wasn't carry-on luggage. You must have had to check that.
Yeah, I shipped it. I shipped it. I actually, so I packed it all up in this big, huge box. The mailing company didn't know what they were dealing with. Big, huge Lorica segmentata armor, Roman helmet, sword, and all of the paraphernalia that goes with it, all piled up into a big box with foam and everything. The box seriously was huge. It was just, it's massive, massive, massive box. But the Lorica actually collapses down on itself, which helps. And then I mailed it. I'd like FedExed that thing to Bad Mike. And he put it in his truck when he was bringing it to the convention, when he was actually like moving all of the frog guard stuff. And Bad Mike has still got my armor actually in his warehouse right now.
Oh, Bad Mike has a. Oh, since we're going to. All right. So Bad Mike still has a taser of mine that I inadvertently flew out to one of the conventions with, and it was not found in New York. So as I am searching my bag the night before flying back, I do oh shit, what the fuck is this doing here? And I'm like, yeah, Mike, you drove, right? He goes, yeah, it's us in your truck. Because I guess in New York they must have been rushed, but I figured in Wisconsin they weren't going to be as rushed, and I didn't want to have to explain it. I couldn't explain it. If they had found it on the way out, I would have been like, no clue why it's in my bag.
Yeah, honest, Gov. I don't know why I've got a taser with me. Come with me.
Yeah, it was cheap, and you can get it at 13deals.com. Not just saying, but yeah, no, I was like, oh my God. So yeah, I think you'd have an easier time explaining traveling with the armor, but thank God you didn't have to. But yeah, I think Bad Mike is the repository of a lot of things that
he definitely is. He definitely is. And he's great. He's got such a good soul for actually tracking all of this stuff. But yes, Bad Mike is holding arms and armor. He is a prepper for sure. Arms, armor, and a taser apparently, plus some artwork and board games. Like over at Gamehole Con the last time. So what we're talking about, 2019.
Yeah.
I looked going to the auction on that one, and I walked away with a complete set of Hate the board game. I didn't even want Hate the board game, but I'm bidding on it, and now I've got it, and it's huge, boxes upon boxes, and I'm like, what am I going to do with this? I can't put this in luggage. No. Bad Mike, can you take this to the warehouse? Well, he's still got it, of course. So he's just accruing things over the years.
You know, when you watch like I don't know, a movie, and they show that this is the government warehouse where stuff from, you know,
like Raiders of the Lost Ark or something, where it just goes on.
That is the North Texas warehouse. Now I've been there, and you walk down it, and you go, "Oh my God, how?" It's what you would want if, well, you were a gamer and be able to walk to a random shelf, and go, "My God, there's got to be a stack of like, I don't know, 6,000-7,000 Judges Guild books here that I could just leave, most of them still in the shrink." Wow. And you look at that and you're like, oh my God. So yeah, it's like nerd heaven. Mike has a great collection. Thanks to all of you. Thank you. That's Jennifer Glazer.
Yeah.
And she's not wrong. Now, hey, maybe Bad Mike will give some of that away on Wednesday when we do our next talk and crit. We gave away some prizes last week and some things from the warehouse.
Yeah, like a Roman helmet.
Oh no, I don't have the Roman. Although I could say, Mike, if you could look for a Roman helmet, if you could find a way to ship it, I think I have to go back to Alyssa. You might not be able to ship the armor right now. I don't know if you have a box big enough. You might be able to get your helmet. God only knows. John Miller calling it the vault. You know what? I've been to the warehouse. I wouldn't quite call it the vault, but it is certainly a place with a lot of great gaming material. It's a wonder to see. So, well, Alyssa, this has been awesome, and I think I'm going to speak for everybody who's been watching live. Is that we got to do this again, because you generate nice questions. You really do. People, not that any of us can learn your secret, because when you reach your level of talent, it's also a God-given gift. Some part of that is you can learn a lot of it, but that extra percent that puts you over the top, that's what that 12-year-old you knew that you had.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I will say that I have no problem sharing my style, my approach, or anything about my mapping at all. This is a hobby. We're all in this together, and I will share. I am sharing more and more and more on my Twitch, but also my Patreon. Feel free to follow me over there. I'm doing monthly guides all of the time. And also, we're going to be growing my YouTube channel. I've been neglected over this last year or so. It's had several months worth of work put into it recently, just to clear it all up. We're now in the process of releasing guides and me reviewing my own maps onto that channel. So 2021.
Doing your own critique.
I'm going to do my own critique. Alyssa critiques Alyssa, and so we're going to start releasing those as well. So 2021 is going to be exciting, and I encourage you. I mean, again, I don't like doing a sell at all, but for $5 a month on Twitch or $5 a month on Patreon, you get access not only to all of this stuff, and I give you monthly things back. I give you tool sets and brush sets, but I'm also doing guides every month, at least 1 or 2 every month. This is how I draw this. This is how I draw that. And you get access to it and my private Discord channel. So you can come hang out, and I invite people to sort of say, hey, how would you draw this? And I'll do it. I'll show you how I would draw it. I'll do it live for you. I'll record it. Because you give me inspiration about what you want to know about. So come hang out, and I would love to share my techniques.
All right. So Joe, what's your Twitch name?
Alyssa Fayden. Well, actually, so you should be able to see it under my name here, spelled correctly. So all of my social channels are like Instagram, Alyssa Fayden, Facebook, Alyssa Fayden, and Twitch /Alyssa Fayden. Same on YouTube. So just look for Alyssa Fayden on any of those channels.
If you're watching on YouTube, the notes on YouTube, the description box should have links to Alyssa's Patreon and her Twitch. If you are listening on the podcast, I will include those links in the show notes. And well, at least I feel like I've rejuvenated some of my convention battery. I finally, because we would probably have had a very similar conversation if we were going to conventions. Maybe not exactly, but we would have covered up some of these topics. That's for sure.
No, and I've really appreciated this, and certainly, Eric, I've got the same vibe from it. I love doing this from the point of view of just sitting down and chatting with you. And we don't get to do this enough. At conventions, you're manning the booth. I sit down with you and your darling wife. We maybe exchange 5 minutes, and then I'm off because I'm running a game or I'm in a game or something's going on. So it's always very whirlwind. This has been great just to sit, chill, and chat, and I love doing that.
Well, I told you before we started, I said, if you've never seen a Fireside Chat, we don't have bullet points. We don't have a script. We don't have come in it with having done research. Well, I didn't have to do research. I know Alyssa, but what I mean to say is, we come into it with the idea that we're going to have an honest to God conversation and see where it goes. And I think we've done that. And we really appreciate everybody in the comments on the live stream, because you gave us some really good questions, really good things that Alyssa could address. So again, well, here, we're going to throw this out to Pex. Pex. Alyssa's welcome back whenever she wants to return. We'll leave it up to you to schedule it, because
I would love to. I would love to. Honestly, I don't get to hang out with you enough. I don't get to hang out with Skeeter enough, and all of these guys. And I think we're kind of on a level where we're kind of all doing our own thing. We're all sort of super busy, and I think we're like, no, she'd be too busy, and we're off. We're doing other things. I would love to hang out again. We didn't even talk about history or
we didn't.
Or miniatures or painting.
Hey, listen, maybe you're wearing a TotalCon shirt. Maybe you can be one of our special guests during our TotalCon streams.
I would love to. Angela has contacted me and said, hey, will you be a guest? Yes, of course I will, Angela. I love you. And she was like, will you run some things or do something? So count me in. We'll do it.
Awesome. All right. Talking about live streams, Bad Mike and myself, 8 p.m. this Wednesday, which is the 23rd of December. Mike and Liz Stewart are our special guests.
Nice.
So that should be a lot of fun. And something that's probably been off and on talked about between the Stewarts and myself since I started doing my solo podcast. But I'm really glad they're getting to come on with Mike and me because we're going to have a blast.
Now, is that time, Eric? You said
8 p.m. Eastern. We asked Liz if she would drop an F-bomb. She said she might drop an S-bomb or two just to make us happy. But so if you want to hear Liz Stewart curse, and not because she dropped something, tune in, and hopefully we can give you the Stewarts uncensored.
Nice.
All right, folks. As always, thank you. Be safe. Be well. God bless. Roll those dice. And I will talk with you all, God willing, tomorrow. Again, Alyssa, thank you. And thanks to everybody who hung out with us live. Appreciate it. Laters.